get started, please. Pamela asked me to make sure you're checking for the lost clicker. We have a trio performing for us this morning. First, we'll have we have John Matthews, who was the emergency management director during the fires last year in Gatlinburg in Sevier County. And we have Bryan Carter, who is the vice mayor for Sevier County. And we have Jerry Ware, the chairman of Mountain Tough. And we'll let them do their own little synopsis of what they do. And we're live. On YouTube. On YouTube.
So if you have a question, speak up. So if they have questions, speak up.
So if during the next presentation you have questions, please speak up so everybody can hear. And I would like to take this opportunity, since we have our Sevier County people here, I think for the first time, welcome. We are so happy you're here.
We're going to take this mic off, and just to kind of, since it's live on the internet, we need to cut out some stuff in the slideshow. So it takes that stuff off.
John, you may want to sit down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, we should have warned you.
And we're going to kind of, first of all, on behalf of Mayor Larry Waters, County Mayor for Sevier County, who's unable to be here today, we want to welcome you guys to Sevier County, to Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Sevierville area. Appreciate you guys coming here for the conference. We do have some of our esteemed Sevier County procurement folks here today. Back there in the back, there's, yeah, can you raise your hand because it's embarrassing, please? Thank you. That's right. So we appreciate those folks, and my name is Bryan McCarter. I'm the vice mayor for Sevier County. I was the finance director and either got promoted or demoted. I'm not sure which one it was in July. Actually, Brooke Huffaker is the new finance director for Sevier County, and she's here. And so Brooke's back there with the group. She is abnormally tall and plays on our intramural basketball team. So, but we appreciate them being here as well. We're going to kind of, this subject of the wildfire it's a little sensitive to us just because this is our home that this happened to. And there's a lot, in retrospect, it's crazy to think we're a year from this event. There's a lot of things that we learned from an admin standpoint, specifically procurement, but there's a lot that we're still learning. So we're going to try to touch base on some of these topics. I want to rely on a lot of our folks that actually were on the front lines of this, which is Tanya and Sonia and Brooke, as we went through this. And, you see the things on TV and the disaster itself, but we can't begin to tell you the administration aspect behind that is making a lot of that stuff happen. And then Jerry Ware's here from Mountain Tough, and he's going to talk a lot about how we got around the state procurement laws using Mountain. No, I'm just kidding. So, that's okay. So that's pretty much what it is. So, and we want this to be a conversation. So we're going to pass the mic back and forth a lot. We want this to be kind of interactive as much as it can be. So if you have questions, feel free to let us know. And I'll go to the slide here just to tell you a little bit about us. It'll go. How's that? Okay. So a little bit about me. Born and raised here in Sevier County. I was a graduate of Sevier County High School and Carson-Newman University. I am a certified public accountant, which is unusual because I have an outgoing personality. And actually there is a CPA conference here that I was been at this week as well. So you can tell the difference between the two groups. It's amazing. So and former finance director and current vice mayor. And I'll only let John talk a little bit here.
Well, thanks again for having me. And, like Bryan said, this is our home. And you watch these disasters take place all across the country. And, it's typical. You kind of see the sheriff, the mayor, the emergency management director, and speaking to the public on a national platform. And, we're all sitting in our homes, we're getting ready for work, and we're watching these tragedies unfold, and you think, gosh, what a tragedy. It's hard to comprehend when it's home, when it's actually happening here. And that's exactly what we did on November 28th. Was a day that I always like to say it started out just like any other day. Like we all woke up that morning, we all went to work, we all did the things that we normally do on a typical Monday and didn't think anything else. And then of course, 6 p.m. to the 10 p.m. hour that night changed, countless lives. So do you have a picture of me up there? So I don't know. Bryan did this. I don't know what he's got up there. He probably would make fun of me if I know Bryan. So born in Florida, but now considered a Sevier County local, which is technically true. I think they finally accepted me. I don't know. I might be the first Floridian they've done that to. And I did go to LMU. I've got a business background, but been 14 years in emergency services. Started as a paramedic, fireman at the Galvin Fire Department, and sort of worked my way up the ranks. And but that's it. I think we're actually.
You forgot the last.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just something. Oh, yeah. Which is true. Thank you for that, Bryan. Thank you. The good thing is I don't get embarrassed. I think he's trying to embarrass me. That's really hard to do. So. And so I think we're going to do an overview of the fire. You want to do this?
It doesn't matter.
I know that, of course, you've seen this on TV. It was 17,000 acres that was destroyed, and the rate of the fire was pretty impressive. It's about a half an acre a second. So, we had fire modeling behavior software that we had in the command post, looking at the wind speed, the current humidity factor. This technology that was several thousands of dollars that the city of Pigeon Forge purchased. And I wonder what Tony Watson, who's the fire chief, told their procurement office that, hey, we need $40,000 to purchase this equipment. But we used it that night, and it said that the fire that was at Twin Creeks Pavilion was not going to reach the city limits for another 19 hours. That was at 4:30 p.m. Unfortunately, around 6 p.m., an hour and a half later, the fire was there. And so from 6 p.m. to about the midnight hour, it burned about 15,000 acres. And at that time, like I said, it was about a half an acre a second. So if anybody knows what an acre lot looks like and you try to sprint half of that in 1 second, you can see how fast that fire was burning.
So does anybody want to take a guess how many structures were damaged or destroyed in the fire? How many structures do you think were damaged or destroyed in the fire?
And broken time.
Yeah, you guys can't answer. So, actually, I don't think I really can answer until I get the updated numbers. You might want to take a guess. 2,500. Man, that's pretty good. The total number, that's right, exactly. Within the total that were actually destroyed or damaged, 2,511. Here's our updated, as of last Friday, amounts here. You can see was affected within the county, within the city of Gatlinburg, within the city of Pigeon Forge, and then our full totals across the board. It's pretty amazing. We talk about the structures lost. It just blows my mind. If you look in Chalet Village, north, which has just short of 600 cabins, how many survived?
I think it was like 8.
8 or 9. I mean, it's amazing. And this doesn't tell the full story. The worst statistic of them all are the 14 folks that died. And so, but if you can imagine dealing with something of this magnitude.
And one thing I'll add is that when we're talking about structures, that's just it. So, at a certain point in the disaster, after November 28th, it was probably the 30th or December 1st, so we're still actively, we have the city of Gatlinburg shut down. There's nobody. We have the Air National Guard, we have the police, the state troopers blocking all entrances in the city of Gatlinburg, did not let anybody in. They were actively doing search and rescue. And at that same time, we also had to get to each one of these structures and put somebody in front of it and do what we call a damage assessment. Because we needed FEMA to come in and help with this disaster, which they're watching it unfold on TV just like we were, but they need hard numbers. They need to know what happened. So we needed to find out how many homes were actually damaged. Plus we needed to let people know, and so they would actually stop calling our office to find out, hey, did my cabin burn down? Because a lot of people don't live here. They are in Florida, they're across the country, and they have this house as a secondary home or on a rental market. And so we had to do this interactive map that they could go to and click on and say, this house is damaged, this house is damaged, so if they're not from here, they can get that information without having to call somebody. Well, going, 2,500 different places, it took a daunting task. And not only that, we had no cell phone reception. So now we're sending people, strangers, to an area that had no road signs because they were all burnt, no mailboxes because they're all burnt, no houses because they're all burnt, and we're sitting no GPS. So we had to print off these maps. We had to make sure they knew where they're at, and they could find one landmark. Okay, this is 2157, and they go to the next house. Well, this is 2159 because it's on odd numbers on one side of the road, even numbers on the other. Maybe you didn't know that. I don't know. So, and when we say a structure, that is just it. If it was a like Westgate, for example, that's a timeshare resort. There was multiple buildings that burnt down. So one building could have had 8 to 12 units in it, but we counted it as one structure. So if it was a condominium and there was 6 buildings that had 100 rooms each, we still counted one building as one structure. So that number, even though it says 2511 structures, units for sale or units for rent or whatever is much higher.
And the main reason that we wanted to go over kind of the basis here is it's really tough to put into words the magnitude of this disaster that happened. And it's amazing really to me driving through Gatlinburg now. Going down the spur, you would not know there was a fire there. And I remember the Park Service telling us in the months afterward, they said, 2 to 3 years from now, 75% of the burned area, you will not know that it burned. And I was like, that's no way. But it's amazing how nature is regenerating itself. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about today is some of the things we learned from a procurement standpoint during this wildfire. And like I said, we're still learning. And we're willing to take any questions, that we can do in order to help. Because the first thing I'll say before I go to that slide, is anybody in here from FEMA? Okay, good. So let me say this. So my mom always told me never to use the 4-letter F word. Okay, I never realized that the 4-letter F word was really FEMA. Okay, that was a new thing to me. FEMA has been a good partner with us. They really have. They are a great funding agency. But in my opinion, that's really, they are a funding agency. They're there to help from that standpoint. I think that disaster recovery is more reflective upon the local leadership than it is upon FEMA. And FEMA really partnered well with us, but I can't begin to tell you the magnitude of how large of an organization FEMA is to deal with. And you're dealing with a federal agency, not a state agency. You're dealing with a federal agency. It's totally different. So the big thing is, in moving forward with that, know the magnitude of who you're dealing with from this standpoint. Couple of lessons, I think, from our standpoint. What did we learn? And I'm talking from a procurement standpoint, okay? Prepare for an emergency. Don't assume that it will not happen to you, okay? And John will talk more about this. We've had disasters here before. I never thought a fire would consume Gatlinburg like it did. I mean, would you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree. And I've said this in every meeting that we would have after November 28th, and we'd bring in all these people that were willing to help. Disasters start local and they finish local. FEMA will come in and they will be here for a short period of time and then they leave. And so we're all the volunteers that are willing to help, and then who the people that live here are going to be stuck with. And of course, Jerry's got a lot to say about how that works whenever he gets to stand up and talk. But, obviously, state of Tennessee has procurement laws. Sevier County falls underneath the what's that? General law. So, I mean, we have the most flexibility out of all the laws there are for state procurement. And yes, when you declare a state of emergency, you being the county or the county mayor or the chief elected official in a city. Are you all county folks, or is it city? So make sure, okay. So whoever the chief local elected official is, city or county mayor, can declare a state of emergency, which will, by Tennessee state law, allow them to, avoid doing anything with procurement, having to take out bids. They can pretty much do whatever they want. But it's only for 7 days. And then after that 7th day, they can reissue another state of emergency. So we did 2, so we had it for 14 days. And which is great when you want to start spending this first little bit of dollars. But once FEMA comes in, they'll constantly say, don't do anything that you wouldn't do if we weren't here, meaning, hey, we're going to go ahead and do and clean all this stuff up because we know you're going to pay for it. But if you weren't here, we might not do that. Okay, that's one big pet peeve that FEMA doesn't want to hear. And I'll get into that in a minute when we talk about trees. But, another thing is, even though they say that, they want you to follow federal procurement guidelines. Am I going too fast? Do you have that somewhere?
A little bit, yes.
Well, maybe we'll wait.
We've
But
got a whole slide on procurement.
yeah,
policy.
and the federal procurements are totally different from local or state procurement guidelines. And all it really is going to do, and we'll get into it in a minute, but it will bog down everything that you're doing. And trust me, time is of the essence in a disaster. One, because you have none of it. You have no spare time to do anything extra. And sitting in an 8-hour class with FEMA attorneys was not something you really liked. Did you like that class?
It was
It
awesome.
was a really good class. I'm gonna pass it out.
Nothing says fun like federal lawyers.
Yeah.
So, and I'll say this much: something that I didn't do as finance director. How many of you have actually sat down with your EMA folks and talked about what you're going to do in case a disaster happens? A few.
Well, that's Rowan County, just because we're in a federal disaster.
That's good. I'm telling you, if you have not done so, you need to do it. One good thing, and of course, John and I become good friends working for the county. He left us, which is embarrassing, but on his part.
I kept getting made fun of.
Yeah. But John brought us in on day one, the procurement folks, finance folks, because once you're done with the disaster management aspect of it, the initial part, then all the other stuff starts. And what they need finance folks to be able to do what the finance folks need to do, which is deal with FEMA from a finance standpoint, talk with them, build those relationships. So if you have not talked with your local EMA folks, schedule a time to do so. And just go through them and just say, look, in case something happens, what do I need to be doing? And then look internally, what do we need to do in order to know that when the time comes, we're going to have to get into action. You've got to have those means of communication. We were very lucky that John included us from day one. You can imagine, including finance folks on a significant disaster like that on day one seems like something that would not come to somebody's mind, but he did. And that helped us out tremendously. So like I said, work with your local EMA director to establish procurement standards and involvement. You want to be sure to be able to be there to assist on hand. And because after the initial disaster management, the procurement starts up, and you want to be ready to go. I use, like John said, this is a great example. Have ordinances or resolutions in place to deal with emergency purchases during trying times. Okay. For counties, it's a little weird because everybody's under different establishments, like the 81 Act and those type of things. So there's some different things with that. City of Gatlinburg had an ordinance basically that followed the state guidelines that basically said the city manager can essentially write a memo to establish this emergency time period, and it relieves some of the procurement policies that they had in place for a particular point in time. I know everybody's had this happen before. How many of y'all have had somebody from maintenance come in and say, we've got an AC unit down, I need to do an emergency purchase? Okay, that happens all the time. And our response is, that's not a definition of emergency purchase. But then I'm like, you know what, I really don't know in our standards if we've ever truly defined what is an emergency purchase. So having these things in place ahead of time is key. And I'm telling you, I would sit there right now thinking, yeah, okay, I wouldn't think anything about it because you're sitting there thinking it's not going to happen to you. Trust me, it could happen to you. All right? Trust me on that. I'll talk a little bit about this and let John talk about it as well. Document. Okay? We document, I think, very well in our office. Very, very well in our office. It is not near what you have to document for FEMA. So you need to have staff trained to document per the FEMA standards. And what are the FEMA standards? It's document everything to the nth degree. You can never document too little for FEMA. And it's frustrating at times, But you've got to be willing to know to do it on day one, because that's when your biggest expenses are going to come in. What do you say about the document stuff? Can't cuss.
I won't say any bad words, I promise. A great example, and I alluded to it earlier, is trees. FEMA comes in and they've got this book that they call the Papa G, okay? It's just a manual. It says, here's what we're gonna come in your disaster, and here's what we can cover. It's black and white. If it's not in there, hey, we're not gonna cover it. But we know, is in the emergency management world, that across the United States, that they have, looked a little bit different at certain places and set precedents on certain items. So we didn't want to be treated any different. We said, hey, you know what? We know that you did in California, in Texas, that you allowed us to cut down standing dead trees. It's one, if the tree's broken from a windstorm, we know it's dead, you can go pick it up. Your highway department needs to document that they picked it up. They gotta take pictures of the trees, the load. They gotta write down who was in the truck. They gotta say where they took it, and they had to be to an approved place, and they had to dispose of it properly. And they had to make sure that they had to make sure that it was all done correctly. Well, that's one thing. We know how to do that. We do that in every ice storm. Every county that's been affected with an ice storm in the last 15, 20 years has somehow had to do that with their highway department, or even their city public works. But when they're standing, a tree that looks just, like it's gonna live or maybe die. Of course, this was in the fall, so there's no leaves on it. We didn't know if it was gonna sprout in the spring. So we wanted to make sure that none of these trees were going to die and to hurt somebody in the future. So we wanted to cut them down. And of course, it's gonna cost a lot of money because there's a lot of trees that got burnt in this fire of 17,000 acres. And so FEMA said, absolutely, we'll let you do that. It wasn't that easy. We had to write several letters and argue with them, but once they said, yes, you can do that, they said, you just need to document it. And their version of documentation is a lot different than you would assume. So, which means we had to spend a lot of money just to document. Now that money's reimbursable. So talk about wasting federal dollars, but they wanted us to hire an arborist. Okay, they're about $140 an hour, I think is the going rate. So we hired this arborist, or a tree whisperer, whichever you want to call it. They go to these trees, they peel off the bark, they hit it with a hammer, they look at it, and they say, they got this little sheet of paper, and they're gonna write down, this tree is going to die within 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and it's this species, jot down some notes. Well, now FEMA wants us to take a picture of that tree. So they sit back, they take a picture, and then they gotta get GPS coordinates of that tree. And then they literally just went like this. They went to the next tree, and they did the same thing, took a picture. We had to do that for thousands of trees, and hire this guy, and then store those pictures on some computer, and submit that all into FEMA. And that's not even cutting them down. That was just so we can get reimbursed to cut them down. So you're spending millions, because we hired a company called Thompson Consulting. I don't know if you get into that later on, but we had to hire help. And there's plenty of consulting firms out there that do disaster management, and trust me, they will be at your doorstep day one, telling you that they want you to use them. And that one lady, we were in a meeting, she worked for FEMA, and she said, you just need to do what you would normally do, whether we were here or not. And I said, ma'am, I'm just going to be as blunt as possible as I can, but be really respectful. I said, if you think, or if anybody has ever told you that they would take pictures of every single tree and store them on their computer, they're just lying to you. I was like, if you were not here, I promise you, we would just go cut these trees down. Like, we would not take a picture of it, because I'm not gonna sit at my computer, one weekend, just be like, man, look at that blue spruce, yeah, it looks great, look at that other tree. I mean, who does it?
So the moral of the story is, you've got to document from day one, and you've got to know how to document. Because if you don't, you're not going to get reimbursed. I mean, you can go out and cut as many trees as you want to, but if you're going to be a federally declared disaster area, you've got to do all the steps in order for FEMA to reimburse you. And they're going to reimburse 75%, and the state of Tennessee brings in 12.5 under most circumstances. So the county or city or the jurisdiction will be on the hook for the 12.5% of that. John mentioned consulting. I'm telling you, you can't do this without a consultant. And there are a ton of them. And as he said, as soon as your disaster happens, they'll be there telling you that they can help you. So and that was something I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't prepared to have people soliciting us on day one. I mean, they're doing these stuff for the press conferences, and there are disaster firms out there soliciting. And most of them do really good work. It's just knowing how to deal with that. And Jerry could talk a lot about the donations too aspect. I mean, that is a totally other aspect of management of this disaster was the sheer amount of donations. I'm pretty sure, haven't confirmed, Brooke cussed me multiple times because she had to document gift cards coming in. Think about that. So it's crazy to think
One
about
thing
that.
I'll add to that is that, when it comes to, first of all, if you don't know what you need to be documenting, definitely, not only he alluded to, get with your email director or email staff, they know, or they should know. There's plenty of training across the state that tells them exactly what FEMA is gonna be looking for when they come in. And when it comes to donations, though, there's a lot of things that we did because we knew we were gonna be out 12.5% of whatever we spend. So if we spend $1 million, we're gonna be out $120,000, $125,000, essentially. So that was fast math too, And we just wish it only cost us $1 million. So you get the point. So you can offset those costs by documenting what you put in it. Some of that is donations. But the problem with that is FEMA wants you to, Jerry will get to, I hate to get into Jerry's food here, but we would get semi-trailers of just semi after semi, hundreds of just used clothes, toys, you name it. Well, FEMA wants you to document everything you got, where it came from. This came from First Baptist Church in Wyoming, and it is da-da-da-da-da, and it's worth da-da-da-da-da. And then where did it go to? Well, we gave that, those used clothes from the church in Wyoming to John Matthews' family on this and such date. Now, Jerry, would you have been able to do that? We didn't do that, by the way, but it's almost impossible. So, that's the type of documentation that they're wanting, and it's extremely, extremely hard to do.
Familiarize yourself with the federal procurement guidelines. So Sevier County, speaking from us, we're under general law. We're not under the 81 Act or the 56 Act. We're 70. Wait, 56. That was the year.
I looked for you for those answers, and when you said just general law, so I was like, okay, I'll go.
So we're under general law, which means we're there's not a ton of guidelines, okay, for what we do. Most of our stuff is done internally. But when you start dealing with FEMA, especially on these large projects and different programs, you have to deal with federal procurement standards, okay? How many pages do you think is in the federal procurement manual? You might want to take a guess.
It's like that big.
Yeah. So there's 1,236 in volume 1, okay? So, and a lot of that's redundant, but the whole point being, I had no clue about federal procurement standard. I had a little bit because we dealt with federal grants and stuff, but not on this scale. And they want you to follow them. And they want you, there's so many things that you wouldn't think of. You have to document on affected small business owners. If you're being fair to affected small business, it's amazing what you have to do. Lucky for us, we had Thompson Engineering that helped us through these things. We also have good consultants with TEMA. Getting in with TEMA is great. But you have to familiarize yourselves with federal procurement. I wouldn't read the whole book, but there are resource tools out there with your local EMA folks and also with the state in order to help understand how that works. The other thing, and this was really for me, was familiarize yourself with FEMA. It's a large organization. And you got to get to know the lingo, because you'll get in with these folks and they start talking the lingo, category A through G, and I'm sitting here going, I have no clue what category A is, or category B, but they're looking at me acting like I should know what that is. And so you've got to familiarize yourself with FEMA and their lingo. And I'm telling you, your EMA director, John helped us through that. And so get with your local EMA director, familiarize yourselves with FEMA. That is huge. And use TEMA as a resource. TEMA was very helpful and only a phone call away when we needed them. And they were really our mediaries. Once FEMA left the area, they were our intermediaries between them and still are on the PPDR program. We won't talk about that program.
That'd be another 30 minutes.
Yeah, at least. So use the resource tools that are there and prepare as if it's going to happen to you. You have to, from that standpoint. That's all the summary stuff. I was going to give economic numbers. What else do you think, John?
The one thing that if you're wanting to track to get this reimbursement on the back end. If you want to track resources to where you can get that 12.5% cost a little bit lower than, than if we're spending $10 million, it's gonna be $12 million that taxpayers have to pay for in a disaster, which is a lot of money, is you can track volunteers. And a funny story is I remember sitting in the command post, obviously maybe an hour's worth of sleep in 3 days, wearing the same clothes, and it was at night. I remember sitting there with Larry Waters, our county mayor, and a few other people, and this woman walks up, and she had a group of people with her, and she said, hey, Mr. Mayor, do you remember me? And used this as an introduction. Of course, he's talking to her, and she's like, I'm here to look for a guy named John Matthews. And I'm thinking, well, Larry's not gonna call him. I mean, he's not gonna say, oh, he's sitting right there. So I'm just kind of seeing what he's gonna say. And sure enough, he goes, oh, no, look no further. He's just right there. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm thinking, she comes up, she starts talking to me. And the whole time, I'm just looking at her thinking, how did she get in this command post? Who let this lady in here? But it was really a good thing. And her side of the story is a whole lot different. She got a phone call from Nashville, and they said, you need to get to Gatlinburg ASAP, and you need to do whatever you can do, but you have to find a guy named John Matthews. And that girl, she came and she found me. I don't know how she did it and what she did, but she came to that command post, and she set up what we call a Volunteer Reception Center, a VRC. And we managed about 22,000 individual volunteers that came in this disaster. We gave them wristbands, we had them scan in and out, we knew what job site they were on, and tracking all those numbers allowed us to use that as a match, a local match. So that is about the easiest way, I think, if you want to get that local match, is to track your volunteers.
I just want to touch base on one thing. I thought folks, being mostly financial folks, you might like to see some of the most recent economic numbers. So I figured I'd touch base on that for 1 or 2 minutes and let Jerry talk about Mount Tough and the overwhelming donation aspect and how all that worked. Overwhelming in a very positive way. That was really moving. I just want to show you the sales tax comparison. This is July 2016 to 2017. Sevier County outside the cities, we're up 9.8%. As most of you know, if you're dealing with county sales tax, a lot of that can be determined upon if you have a big box store move into a rural area that you're going to get the situs money off of and stuff like that. So we don't really use ours as a big indicator of economic ups and downs because of that. In July, Gatlinburg was down 17.3% in sales tax. I'll show you their trend that they had. Sevierville down 4.1%. Pigeon Forge up 6.6%. Keep in mind, before the wildfire, Pigeon Forge was month after month posting 12 to 15% gains in sales tax from prior year. It's unbelievable, the growth in Pigeon Forge. And from a budgeting standpoint, how that really helps when you get your sales tax, especially for them that they're all sales tax driven. Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg both have such a low property tax. Gatlinburg may still be 20 cents. It's not much. Overall, if you were to add everything up across the board, we were down 1.3% in July. I got our August numbers, and they weren't as they continue to get better. Let me show you Gatlinburg since the wildfire. Beginning in December 2016, this is compared to the prior year. Gatlinburg was down 34.3% in sales tax. Now, for a city that is dependent upon sales tax as their primary funding, that is huge. And one of the busier months, right in there, December. You can see January got a little bit better. February, March, April, you can notice a trend. It's getting better. And actually in August, I didn't include the August numbers, I just got them. Gatlinburg was up 5.1% compared to prior August. That's probably more of an outlier. There's a lot of factors that come into play. All that to say, from a sales tax standpoint, the Eclipse brought in people, yeah, it could have. So, you never know. So, that sounds like somebody works in tourism looking for a reason for something. Yeah. So, but I just wanted to show that, sales tax comparison on our tourism season. Sevier County's up a little bit, Gatlinburg down 14, Sevierville about even, Pigeon Forge up. Aggregate, we're down just slightly, but we think that's pretty good compared to what's really happened from that standpoint. We'll stop here, let Jerry talk, and we'll get some questions at the end from folks.
Now, his comparison of those numbers are based on last year, and he should remember, and you should know, that last year was a phenomenal year. It was a record-setting year. So we're doing okay. We're getting back to normal. I'm Jerry Ware. I'm a graduate of LMU too, the University of Mississippi and the University of Tennessee. So I've been around a little bit. Past district governor for Rotary for East and Middle Tennessee. And what we saw these people over here working themselves to death with all city officials, the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Sevier County, trying to survive the disaster. And it wasn't working. We had several challenges besides just the fire. It was, the national government was late in declaring this a disaster area. That was one of the things, so FEMA didn't come in right away. 16th of December, so, you know, most of the time you get better response. I think that was basically a political thing, but that's my judgment. Anyway, the cities were overwhelmed with all of this, and we had a massive influx of donations from all over the country. 18 different states sent tractor trailer loads of supplies to our people, and we will never be not grateful for all that help, because we couldn't have made it with all of that stuff. But in that, the largest percentage was used clothes, which is a total killer for people who are working to try to help people. Because lots of people want to help, and what they'll say, oh, you remember we had a rummage sale last year and that stuff didn't sell. I'm sure they can use it. So we got tons of things like that. At one time we had 450 volunteers working, sorting through, discarding clothes that we would not, and we said, if we won't wear it, or our family person wouldn't wear it, we're not going to give it to our people who have already lost so much. So we were trying to discard it. We ended up baling that in 1,100-pound bales and selling it, then using the funds to put back to buy things needed. This is where I guess I come into play. Even though you have a disaster clause about your procurement procedures, we saw that the governments could not deal with the individual needs immediately. So Rotary decided, and we approached the county and the 3 cities and said, please let us take this over. We had tons of things coming to us, and we knew that we had contacts all across this country. And Rotarians are community leaders, and their motto is give back, to make this a better world, to build a better future for our people. So we knew those people are also business and corporate leaders. So they had direct access to things that just the general public did not have access to. So some of the factories would send us a factory load of certain things. Bush's called up and said, we would really like to help. We've got some trucks ready. We're gonna send you a truck of beans. I said, okay, that's fine. We decided, Pigeon Forge in December had contracted with one of the defunct buildings, Boyd's Bear Theater, and so it was about 150,000 square feet. We had 200,000 square feet at the old Sevier plant in Knoxville. We had some of the used theaters open for storing all our influx of materials that we had to sort. But we made the Boyd's Bear distribution center. So he said, okay, I will send you some. I said, okay, how much are you talking about? Oh, we're gonna send you 48,000 pounds of beans first shipment. If you have ever seen 48,000 pounds of beans, that took a lot of people to move a lot of cases to put them out. And he said, and we've got other trucks waiting. As soon as you finish with those, we'll send you whatever you need. But that was just one example. Churches were overwhelmed by the churches around the state and around the country who'd send them stuff. So they began filtering that to us at Boyd's Bear. What we did is we tried to organize it in the best fashion we could. We had a clothing unit that was broken up into children's, men's, women's work clothes. And we had foods. We had all the foods like a department, a food center. Then we had a medical center where we had pharmacists who volunteered their time to work in this, to donate, to give proper across-the-counter medication. But we had people coming in who had lost their teeth or lost their glasses. And of course, you couldn't go to the county and say, would you order a pair of glasses? So we had the Lions Club joined with us, and they set up an eye program where they came in and did the screening and made the glasses and gave them the glasses as they left. So we were able to get teeth made. We had the Good Hope Clinic in Sevierville who would give us medical care for our people. All they had to do was identify themselves as on our list as fire victims. But the problem was the amount of materials and how to get it organized. And if it wasn't for the organization that he was speaking of, who documented and made assignments of work, we couldn't have made it. That's called Volunteer East Tennessee. And you need to get in touch with us, put those on your list. They're based out of Knoxville. I'm sure that there's one in Middle Tennessee too, but they document workers and they help to assign. They would ask us, what do you need? Where do you need them? And then people would come to their theater, sign up, and then they would send the workers directly to those places to help in what we needed to have done.
That's the girl that hunted me down and found me in command post, by the way.
Yes, that's what he was talking about. Volunteer East Tennessee, great organization. It will help you on your reimbursement amount of money back to FEMA. We couldn't have made it without TEMA. TEMA was right there to help us. They brought in the National Guard. If we needed 2 truckloads of waters from one of our plants, we would call them. They would load the trucks and bring them directly to us. What we also did is, as the people come in, we would say, what do you need? These people were in shock. I had one lady to walk in and she had lost her home. Her husband had had a stroke. He was in the hospital because of the ordeal. They lost their car. They lost all their clothes. They had nothing. And a motel in Sevierville had given her a place. And she said, well, I have a place to stay. And they're letting me stay in Sevierville. But I really need a clock. And I said, okay, we can get you a clock. Now let's get you some food and some clothes. Oh, I don't think I need anything else. Do you have extra clothes? No. Where are you getting your food? So people have given me some food. I'm sure that there's somebody else who needs more than I need. And when you deal with that kind of situation, with these people coming in and they've lost everything, but they don't want to admit they've lost everything, and they don't want to take things from people. That was the other thing. We have some people who wanted to take everything, and then we had some people who really needed everything and didn't want to take anything because they'd never been on welfare, they'd never taken anything from anybody. They believed that they had to earn what they earned, and we had to convince them, people gave you this. They gave this to us to give to you. It's not ours, it's yours. Somebody gave this, they want you to have it. We had another group, which was our illegal aliens. This was another reason that the Rotary decided to get involved, because they were afraid to come to the government and the government distribution centers because they would be reported and they would lose their children and they would have to go back to Mexico or whatever. Now, I'm not for open borders, but we do need workers. So there's somebody somewhere in Washington surely can find out some way to provide work visas for these people so we can have those workers. But these people, we had several motels in the Gatlinburg area that housed hundreds of these workers. They were the first to burn at the bottom, just below the Park Vista Hotel. All those hotels burned and those residencies lost. Many of those rooms would have as many as 20 people living in one room. They did it on a rotating shift. Some would work night shift and sleep during the day, and some would work during the day and sleep during the night. And so they wouldn't come. And we had them living in the woods, in tents, in anywhere they could find. So we had to find places. We were able to have our motels to open up their rooms and give them rooms at a at free cost for the first few weeks. Most of them had reservation, and so at one point they had to start asking them to leave because if they didn't, they'd go out of business and their workers would be out of a job too. So housing became a big issue for us. As the weeks went on, things changed, and the normal procurement process would not have worked because we had to change. Every day it was something different. We started out with strawberry Pop-Tarts. That's the most commonly asked for thing, and water. And then it went to things that they could cook. Because these people were in motels. They had nothing to cook on. They had microwaves, and I was surprised to learn that nationwide, in any kind of disaster, the strawberry Pop-Tart is the first week's necessary thing. So be prepared to find strawberry Pop-Tarts. We did have them. The Kellogg's people donated a whole bunch, and then we started to have to buy them. But it's been a long hassle. It's been a big problem. We still have people out there. We are now building approximately 50 homes for those people who were uninsured, who own their land, but do not have mortgages that are approved for this list. They are approved by FEMA, and so we've given out 4 already. We have 3 more under construction at the present time. We've lost our warehouses, so we're trying to get things as we need them, so that's another procurement problem. But what I would say to you as people in responsibility of procuring things for the government and the needs of your people, when you have a disaster like this, those regulations basically have to go out the window, or you have to get some sort of outside group, non-governmental agency to operate. We were fortunate to have lots of volunteers here who helped us. If any of you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer, and I'm sure they would too. Yes?
I know you mentioned earlier that, you know, the biology of the park bounced back pretty fast, and then you mentioned some of the financial parts have been bouncing back, but I'm just curious, I mean, it sounds like you're still dealing with a lot of people issues and assistance and things like that. Can you give us some type of idea?
We have about 220 people now that we do not have permanent residence for them. That we're putting them in temporary situations. We're very fortunate. There were 2 telethons. The Red Cross came in and did a telethon. Very little of that money ever came to help any of our people here. Dolly had a telethon and raised $12 million. She spent about $8 to $9 million by giving each person that qualified a check for $10,000. And then she gave our group the remaining part, which is $3 million, a little over $3 million. And what we're doing with that is we've limited it to $5,000 per person for emergency unmet needs. We have caseworkers, we've hired caseworkers that are operating in Gatlinburg that take individual requests. They evaluate them. If they can help them with up to $5,000, they do that. If they're not able to meet their need at $5,000, then it's referred to myself and 2 other people on the Unmet Needs Committee, and we can increase the amount of money donated if we think it's justifiable. Dolly has only asked that her money goes for individual needs other than direct construction of homes. But we have replaced septic tanks or partial things that would help to build a house.
Just to add real quick, Jerry's a part of this thing called Mount Tough, recovery team. And your EMA office will know all about this. So after a disaster, what we call this phase is long-term recovery. And in order to bounce back, it's going to take 2 or 3, sometimes 5 years. I mean, Katrina's still trying to do long-term recovery. And that was in 2005, that's 12 years ago. So you have to start and establish an organization, which the term is long-term recovery committee. Okay, we chose to use the Mount Tough, brand. So we called it Mount Tough Recovery Team because it is a team of people. And, we were fortunate enough because we financially could do this, but, most of the time it's just gonna be a group of volunteers. And you're still doing your job day to day, but we were able to put, when I say we, the cities and the county, were able to take money and put it in a pool to help kick this thing off. So we hired an executive director that all this person did was wake up every single day, Monday through Friday, and all they thought about was long-term recovery. They're not worried about emergency management. They're not worried about being the finance director. They're not worried about, being the governor of Rotary. So we had to hire somebody and then we hired them as an assistant, and we also hired our own caseworkers. Now we had Red Cross, we had other social workers come in and help with the workload, but they already have 30 cases at their previous job, and then they're going to take on these fire victims. It just wasn't, we couldn't ask them to do that for 2 or 3 years, so we hired our own. But that is the essential right there. If you want to do anything with long-term recovery, you have to have a committee formed. You don't have to wait till the disaster. You can form these ahead of time. Get their 501c3, they can just be dormant. And then when it comes to getting donated dollars, you can say, hey, you guys want to donate to help the fire victims, donate to this recovery team. So.
Yeah, I'll say this too, to kind of draw some of that together. This is the part I think where it's kind of intangible on disaster recovery. Think about all the organizations and people that had to come together to try to make this work and try to help folks that were really hurting during an awful time. We had Rotary, we had federal, state, local folks. We had our EMA directors, our procurement offices. We had volunteers. We had community members. Everybody had to come together to make this work. And there's always tends to be, I think, a leadership vacuum sometimes when things like this happen. And just pray that your area, we are very blessed to have good, strong leaders in this area, from our county mayor to the city managers, to the city mayors, to folks coming together willing to work together. That's huge. And also the other point I wanted to make, totally off topic of that too, is we've talked a lot about costs. The counties and the cities, in my personal opinion, of course being finance director, I would say this, have been very fiscally responsible for many years. I know what it's sometimes like to either work for an organization or an entity that they look at your fund balance as, let's use some more of this. We don't need to have that. Let me tell you what, you can never have enough fund balance after this. And if anybody needs to know how that, like a good example of that would be us. Because we really saved a long time. Gatlinburg did, Vision Forge did, everybody did. And it's come in handy. We didn't have to worry about stuff like this. We could put money in to help start Mountain Tough. We could do things like that, and that was a big difference.
The Rotary and the Unmet Needs Committee, which I'm the chairman of, we're volunteers. We're not a paid group. Most of my people are all volunteers. We only have 4 caseworkers and a director who's paid. The rest of us are all volunteers. And we've received such financial support. Rotary's contributed over $3 million as well to this project. The Lutheran Church, over $50,000 we just received. Catholic Charities, the Baptist organization, all these other organizations have contributed money to this, along with Dolly's money. It's not all Dolly's money, but she's the biggest contributor. We just want to say, bless you, Dolly, bless you. Other questions? Yes.
I'm with Memphis Light, Gas and Water in Memphis, Tennessee. We service a little over 400,000 customers, and we have emergency as of recent. And I guess my question is, as you all are rebuilding stock, having on-hand materials from a procurement standpoint, have you all decided to increase that stock? One of our conversations often is how much should we keep on hand to be prepared? And you can never obviously have enough for, this type of loss, but have you all started having that discussion on what's a good percentage?
Yeah, they're in a federal disaster right now from that, from the windstorm.
Okay.
right?
Yes.
That wasn't May 4th, it was May 28th.
It was May 28th
Yeah.
before we went live with the division-wide system,
Yeah.
very fun.
Oddly enough, the county actually does have a water department. And now, as far as keeping stuff on hand, me personally, I would not do it. I know you're gonna have you said 400,000 or 4,000?
400,000.
400,000, you're gonna have to have something on hand. But there's gotta be that sense of understanding, hey, this is a disaster, they're doing the best they can, they're gonna be angry people no matter what you do. You can have 400,000 widgets waiting to be installed, whatever they need. But I would call upon TEMA and because we can fly that stuff in, they can track it, and be able to install it in an emergency situation, get with the vendors. Maybe you can have a pre-contract. I'm against pre-contracts too. I know it's kind of really weird. I'm a weird EMA guy, but it is true. You just don't want to be bound. I hate being bound by a contract prior to knowing what you actually need. You can anticipate we're going to need this, this, and this. A disaster happens, and you don't need any of it, but yet now you're bound by some kind of contract. So that's just my take on that.
And I'll say this, a good example locally too would be Sevier County Electric. Sevier County Electric services most of our county, and they had not only this wildfire, which if you can imagine took out, basically they had to go in and rebuild the entire electric grid of Gatlinburg.
$5 million.
Yeah.
And
so,
not one dime reimbursed from FEMA.
yeah, nothing came back from FEMA on that one to them, nothing. They did not qualify for, which.
Because that's category C through G, which is permanent work. It wasn't, you guys will, if you get your email guy, they'll understand what that means. But, FEMA only approved A and B, which is emergency protective measures. So category C through G, which we, tried several attempts to say, we obviously need this money, specifically the electric system. That one grid that he was talking about, up on, there's a main line that goes up Wiley Oak Cliff to the top of Ski Mountain. There was 800 and something customers on it. After the fire, there was like 10. So not only did they rebuild the whole system, there's no revenue coming in because there's no more homes there. So that's, not only, that's $5 million hard dollars, that's not loss of revenue that they're gonna be over the next several years before they get houses put back on this grid.
And I'll say this to something else too. You talk about crazy things that got reimbursed and stuff that didn't. We had a tent that we rented for the Humane Society for them to store things underneath and for animals. That was reimbursable. But none of our costs at the center that we distributed the food for the victims was reimbursable. They denied that. So it's a constant battle with FEMA. And so that and the FEMA folks, don't get me wrong, we're great from that standpoint. But it's just, it gets really frustrating.
Thing that I want to, just so you know, has anybody actually been through a federal declared disaster in your county or city? Okay, so some of you have. One thing you're gonna know is that FEMA is a huge organization. They have thousands of employees. Well, the one that you are most likely gonna work with has not been there that long. I promise you. So, if they know a lot, they're gonna be moved up, and so you'll get this new person, and you can line 5 of them up. And I would say this in front of them. I promise you, it's not that harsh. But you can line 5 FEMA representatives asking the same question. You get 5 different answers, and all 5 will swear theirs is right. So whatever they say, oh, that's reimbursable, yeah, just take it for a grain of, do what you can do, give them the documentation, but more than likely, somebody up higher is going to say, no, it's not. Now, you guys, there's a joint field office currently, I think, still for that disaster, and there's they call it FCO, a federal commanding officer, that the buck stops there. He or she, whoever that person is the person in charge of the federally declared disaster in whatever state. And everything that needs to be approved goes by them. We had a guy named Michael Moore, and then we went to a woman, and I forgot her name, but it was a very hard name to pronounce. And so, but they worked well with us, but as soon as it goes back to Atlanta, which is FEMA Region 4, all your paperwork goes behind every disaster that's in our region. So that's where we're at. And so we've got.
And there's not been any disasters in the southeast region at all.
Yeah, there's not
been hurricanes.
Something like that. So, all this stuff that they were doing, all our paperwork that we want to get reimbursed on, it's just sitting there on somebody's desk because it's on the back burner right now.
Well, what's worse is a lot of these people were promised up to $33,000 for their home. If you could build your home back for $33,000, that's good. But I think the most they've reported, the average is $5,000. So these people who've lost everything, and a lot of them lost their jobs, their businesses, their cars, they're gonna be able to get $5,000 to just restart everything. So I mean, you don't understand the devastation that the individuals are suffering, and that's what I deal with, is the
And FEMA,
individuals.
You know, people think FEMA comes with a blank checkbook. You know, you just line up.
You got
FEMA's
lots
here,
of millions of dollars.
and you, oh, John Matthews, you go, yeah, here we got you that. You know, it doesn't work like that. I would have to come up and I would say, you know, I'm John Matthews, I lost my home. You know, they would say, okay, fill out all this paperwork, or do you have enough money to get a loan? Can you actually physically go to a bank and get money to borrow to rebuild your life? If I can, I'm out. The federal government says you can help on your own. So to get the max payout for this disaster, so if you lost everything, which obviously 2,500 homes, you know, lost everything, but there was 33 individuals out of all those that had no homeowners insurance, they were elderly, they hit all the right criteria to where they were, you know, had nothing, they had nowhere to turn, and FEMA said, okay, we will give you the max payout, which is $33,900. That's it. Rebuild your home. Rebuild your life. Every pot, pan, rug, shower curtain, you know, pictures on the walls.
Think about the others that weren't in
Yeah, and then there was just 31 of those people. Just 31 that got the max payout out of all those people.
And I'll say to your question, Sevier County Electric not only dealt with that disaster, but they dealt with two disasters
so those
after
storms
that.
hit us too. So May 4th and we didn't reach what we call threshold emergency services to get declared a federal disaster on those. We did on May 4th, we reached a threshold and we lost, I think, 1.1 million worth of damages, but it wasn't declared a disaster. Now, May 28th hit West Tennessee, part of it hit us. And so it was declared a disaster, and we just didn't accumulate, it wasn't that big of a windstorm.
Yeah, and
for us.
And the electric system had significant losses over this, and I think they would tell you that they would do things differently now. I mean, to think that they had they emptied a lot of their reserves in order to rebuild these systems, and then for them not to be reimbursable at that point was even tougher. So, but the fact that y'all are thinking about stuff like that, that's awesome.
We keep so many pallets available.
Yes.
We know we got crews coming in from out of town to help, we wanna have it available.
And I know our local utility district, Sevier County Utility District, deals with natural gas distribution. They did sort of the same. They were able to tap into not only their resources, but they were able to tap into state resources to help rebuild.
We also had the problem with the water. The water system is suffering the same way with all those hundreds of buildings in Gatlinburg that burned down. There's no water, and the water rates are set on the anticipation of collecting the fees from those water bills.
And it's a private water.
And it's a private water system. The pumping station between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg burned, so there was no fresh water being pumped into Gatlinburg. That had to be also rebuilt.
Are there contracts you would recommend be established in advance?
You know, if you line up all 95 county EMA directors and ask that question, I think majority of them would answer it like, you know, have something for, you know, emergency transportation, you know, maybe for your highway departments that can come in and clear roads, you know, something that you need in the beginning phases of most disasters. What do we get hit with? You know, East Tennessee, we really don't have to worry about earthquakes, but ice storms, windstorms, you know, all that's gonna create debris. So I think you would be safe if you can get with your highway department and find out something that's gonna be for emergency protective measures, and that's moving debris, clearing it, cutting trees down. You know, the electric system, they have similar, you know, they obviously can't restore all this power with the staff they have, so they have contractors around the states, you know, usually not even in Tennessee, they come from Kentucky or other states, and they come in and help rebuild the grid. I was gonna say something too, and I forgot what it was, but, did you have a question over here? You've been asking, okay.
It was the question about reimbursement. We've had 2 small declarations in Rome County, and it took a year.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that governments need to understand, just like you said, if you don't have that fund balance, you're not gonna get that money for a long time.
Yes.
But, the consulting firm that you use, to track all of your stuff, was that, or an arrangement you already had
No, and you can do that.
Or did you use your emergency procedures?
We had to use federal procurement guidelines because we didn't have one set up. And so that took, we had to bid, we had to bid the job and with the qualifications. And we had to have which we had to learn how to do this, first of all. This was the 8-hour class that we had to sit through for federal procurement guidelines with attorneys. And then we knew that we had to have a selection committee of representations. They could not see what the dollar amount was. And they would go, against all the qualifications that we put out there that we wanted. They'd narrow it down to 2 or 3. Then it would go to another committee of different people, and then they would see the dollar amount, add it to it, and then they can rate them based on this FEMA ranking system. Is it out of 100? Seems like, I know some were at like 75, some got like a score of 85. And then once that was done, it went to another committee, a selection committee, and then they could select it. So it just to keep it to where, it was as clean as possible. And it took a lot of time. I do know what I was gonna say before I forget it again, because you know me. Reimbursements. When it comes to fire departments coming to your aid, okay? The state of Tennessee has a law they passed in 2004 called the mutual aid law. And, hopefully your fire chiefs know this law inside and out because they're the ones that typically call in resources. Now, the police chiefs should know this as well. The EMA directors, oh my gosh, if they don't know this, you might need a new EMA director, I don't know. But, so, the way it looks, that was harsh, wasn't it? The way it looks is that if I'm a fire chief in the city of Gatlinburg, and I say, I need help, somebody please get me help. They reach out to our office, the EMA office, and say, bring some help in. Well, what do you need? I need 100 tankers, I need 100 engines, I need 1,000 people, whatever. So we start getting those resources to come in. Well, whoever this state law that was passed in 2004, mutual aid law states all of this, and it goes down to workman's comp, who's liable for the insurance, and they refer to requesting department and responding department. So the requesting department is responsible for all these costs, and the time starts as soon as the responding fire department, so if it's Memphis, for an example, because that's how we would actually pull from West Tennessee and East Tennessee, as soon as they pull out of their bay, the time starts, okay? And that's Gatlinburg's money, and they requested them. So however long it takes Memphis Fire to get to Gatlinburg, 8 hours-ish, I'm assuming, and then they're gonna stay here for 5 or 6 days, okay? And if they have personnel on there, and then their apparatus is based on what we call a FEMA rate schedule, okay? And this FEMA rate schedule is published online. You can Google FEMA rate schedule. It's a huge document, but they've got everything on there. They've got engines, they've got ambulances, they've got generators, they've got mowers, they've got whatever you are going to donate or use in a disaster. It says it's worth this amount of money per hour. So an engine might be $180 an hour. That's wear and tear, that's diesel fuel, wear and tear on the tires. All that cost is included in that. Plus you have your personnel. So we had one, for example, from Murfreesboro Fire, and their bill was about $55,000, okay? That's just one department. We had almost 3,500 responders come. This is the largest disaster the state of Tennessee's ever seen. We had more resources come here than any disaster in the state of Tennessee's history. 225 different agencies. So you can see where that money adds up. Well, FEMA says, oh yeah, we'll reimburse you. That's good. What do you got here? Oh yeah, all right, you're saying that this guy, he left Memphis, okay, he drove 8 hours, all right, and he stayed here for 5 days, 24 hours a day, times $80,000 bill. So this is great. I'm glad you followed state law, but we don't reimburse people when they're sleeping. We only reimburse people that are working. So now that you've already spent $80,000 to the city of Memphis, we're going to reimburse you $45,000, and then out of that $45,000, you only get 75%. So you see where reimbursements, they're not cut and dry.
Yeah, FEMA's not cut and dry. Now, and if you can't tell, in these meetings with FEMA, John was the bad cop. Okay, I think we might be over time. I think we're supposed to go to 11:30 maybe.
You're taking away from their lunch.
Yeah, it's lunchtime. So, what kind of other questions do y'all have? Is there anything else we might be able to
I just have a quick question about the Red Cross money that was raised?
Yes, ma'am.
Did they use it for food or anything? Did you see any
They did
results of
send in,
that?
we had some counselors, we had, and they gave us publicity that was helped, but physical help to the distribution center, other than the dogs they brought in for counseling. Then we hired our own counselor for one of our local counseling agents, because we had some people and children in terror at night,
So
But
where do
no,
those funds go?
they go to the next disaster, or that's what they told us. It goes to the next
10%.
disaster.
They're not shy about this. 10% stays at the disaster that they're promoting. And of course, they're a large organization that's all paid staff, they're not volunteers, so it costs money to run it. So that's where the 90% of your donations go to. They did give out 26,000 meals, though, I should say that. So they did feed, you know, the Rock Top Sports World, when the victims were there, they fed them, they fed the responders during that.
That was before, the distribution center.
The best
We saw nothing from
phrase ever with these disasters is what John said. He said from day one, he's 100% right. Disasters start local and they will end local.
Please make your contacts with your civic organizations, your churches, any local organization, because they will be the ones who will do the work for you. I promise you.
I'll be honest, I don't know, and I'm not just saying this because Jerry's here. I don't know what we would have done without the Pitchfork Rotary and Jerry Ware. He's unbelievable.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Thank y'all very much.
Checkbook's over there. I need to remember how to stop it. It's under